Are you ready to level up your fabric knowledge?
Well, today we're going to take a deeper dive into fabric and answer some of the questions that you ask us frequently.
Keep watching. Hi, it's Fran Morgan.
And Donna Robertson with Fabric Cafe.
And today we are going to talk about fabric and all of those questions that we get asked all the time.
And that's our favorite subject, isn't fabric?
Always. We love to talk about fabric. So one of the first questions that we get asked is, why cotton?
Whenever I made my first quilt, I knew no difference. And so I went out and I bought fabric, and it turned out to be 50-50. It was 50% polyester and 50% cotton. And it didn't have the same hand, it didn't feel the same way, and it wasn't the good long-lasting quality that I came to love.
Right. And cotton is really important because it is a very durable fiber, and that's probably the number one reason why we choose cotton is because it wears so well. And when you're putting that much work into a quilt, you certainly want it to last a long time. So that's very important.
Absolutely.
The 50-50 poly cotton that can often peel, and that's never comfortable on your skin.
I remember the 70s when polyester sheets became really popular because you didn't have to iron them. Not that I ever ironed my sheets. But oh my gosh, as you washed and dried them, they got those little pills all over them until you finally felt like you were sleeping on the beach.
Not fun, not fun at all.
Not at all.
Batik is also a cotton.
That's right. Now, batiks can be made on several different types of fabric. You can get rayon batiks that are very beautiful and drapey for clothing. But for quilting, I like using the batiks. They're made a little different. The process is a little different, where most of our regular cottons are done in a printed fashion, whether it be a web type where they use cylinders to print it, or if they're doing the digital printing. Either way, it's different than the batiks, which are actually hand dyed most of the time.
I find that absolutely incredible. So there's this process, I don't know it well, but there's a process to making batiks where they actually put a wax design on the surface, and then they put it in the dye vats, and then they wash that wax away with really, really hot water.
Right, it's basically called a color resist because the color won't soak into any of those places where there's wax.
Okay. And when you have a multicolor like this, that means they've done that process multiple times to get multiple colors. Can you use a batik cotton with a regular cotton?
Yes, you can. Now, you might want to keep in mind, though, they're going to shrink slightly different because the regular cotton, it has a lot of sizing in it. That's what they use in order to produce the fabric, where the batiks have been washed with hot water and the shrinkage has already taken place. So they may not shrink exactly the same when you launder them. If you don't like washing your fabric first, and we're going to cover this in more detail in just a little while, then I recommend that you, if you're going to mix those fabrics, that you put them in cold water for washing and don't bother to dry them over much with any heat, just because it'll cause that shrinkage to come about.
That's good advice. Now, I believe we have a quilt we have that is mixing regular cottons with batiks, so let's check it out.
All right.
So this is our gallery quilt, and it's a great example of how we've mixed batik and regular cotton. So as you can see here, the center of this little block right here has our batik as well as our border. And then we've just pulled in some other beautiful colors here that are just regular cottons and not batik, and you can see how beautifully they go together. So it worked perfectly. Let's put this on the table and talk a little more about that. All right, now Mom, this is one of your early quilts that you've done from the modern book, and you did a beautiful job mixing your batik and your regular cottons.
Well, thank you. I have to tell you that part of the reason was because I was a little timid. I knew I wanted the modern book to be mostly batiks and tone on tone because I was trying to avoid trying to do a modern book, but I didn't want kitty cats and puppy dogs all over the quilts. I wanted them to look more modern. And I had difficulty in the beginning when I started working with batiks knowing which colors I'm supposed to pull out of that. Now I feel very comfortable just putting all kinds of things together. But it was a good way for me to be able to show off the design but use two regular fabrics. And I do want to point out, when we talked about the difference in the shrinkage possibility, that the quilter put extra quilting on this. That will also minimize any slight shrinkage.
That's a good tip.
I love this quilting too.
Yes, it is really good. In fact, I was looking at that earlier. It kind of mimics a little bit of the print on the fabric, which I think is really cool.
Yes.
Really, really cool. So the neat thing about batiks is they are usually multicolored, very beautiful, and we have one here, as you've seen, with the greens and the purples and the blues. Gorgeous. So in this case, we have mixed this batik with 2 regular cottons. This would be our focus fabric, which is going to go in the center of this block here, as well as on the border. And then we've kind of taken inspiration from your original quilt, and we have put it with a really beautiful crisp white so that this really pops. And of course the white is everywhere the white is, which makes it very easy to see. And then we've put it with this gorgeous kind of a teal green color that picks up all the greens in this. Ooh,
That is beautiful.
it is beautiful, and that goes everywhere, the blue as the number 3. So I think that it's going to be equally as striking as the original that you've done here.
Well, let's give them a peek.
Let's give them a peek. So we have a great image on the screen for you to see what this is going to look like when it's made up. And gorgeous colors, absolutely beautiful, and works really, really well. So don't be afraid to mix your batiks with your regular cottons. I think it works beautifully.
What about flannels? Can you take flannels and mix them with regular cotton?
I would say yes.
Yes, I would say yes too. In fact, I can remember once that you did that. You have the same issues that you might with the batiks, and that is the flannels actually will shrink more than your regular cotton sometimes. So you want to be cognizant of that issue on the shrinkage. But I remember an early quilt that you did for us that it had white chenille, which was kind of like a flannel, and you mixed it with cotton, and it was fun.
It was fun, and I remember I did a fall quilt using flannel, so it can be done. Now, don't forget that flannels also come in different fiber content. So you have poly flannels, cotton poly flannels, and cotton flannels.
Yes.
So I would definitely stick to a cotton flannel.
One of the more popular things that are going on right now is people like to use minky on the back of their quilts.
Oh.
And I guess you could probably use minky like you do flannels or chenilles or something like that. But the minky on the back of the quilt is really nice. It is something to remember, is that it is also polyester, but it's manufactured a little different than a wannabe cotton blend.
And minky's got a nice cuddly nap to it.
Yes, Janet, a good friend, made Bob a quilt and put minky on the back, and every time he picks up that quilt, he tells me how much he likes it.
That's great. So that's a good option. Now, minky is a little bit heavier fabric. Is it, when you're quilting with it, do you still put the batting in between?
It's really optional. If you live in a northern climate where it's a little colder, you might want to go ahead and put that batting in there. It'll make a much heavier quilt. But if you live in the south, we do get cold in the wintertime, but our cold is like 40.
Which one we love.
You can make a lighter quilt by just skipping the batting, and then you can just put those two together and quilt it if you want.
That's nice because it saves you some money, which is always good.
Always fun, always fun.
All right, so let's get the kit information on this gorgeous kit. So this is called Moonlight Lagoon.
Ooh, I like that.
The number is 8023237, and the pattern is Gallery from the Modern Views book. So one of the most often asked questions that we get is if we pre-wash our fabric.
A lot of it is just, what do you prefer? And I can tell you that the first person that introduced me to quilting told me that I should wash my fabrics, all of my fabrics, but that's all she told me. And so I would enter my house from the back door into my laundry room. So I went and bought fabric, and I came in the back door and I opened my washing machine, and I took my bag and I shook it into the washing machine, put a little soap in there, turned it on, went away, came back to the biggest mess I had ever seen in my life.
You know, that's so funny that you say that, because I did something similar. Now, I had already started collecting fabric, and so I had a bunch of fabric on my shelf. And then I found out, I'm supposed to pre-wash it? What? Okay, so I went and gathered everything out of my little storage bin, like it was a lot, threw it all in the washing machine together. The same thing happened. It was a mess.
Yeah, you probably wondered why I didn't talk to you for 3 days, because I was busy cutting threads and pulling pieces of fabric apart. Oh, it was such a mess.
Okay.
This is the thing, is that on your fabric, when you buy it, it's going to fray like it is right here. And so what we recommend is that you either use your zigzag attachment or your serger, and you just serge that edge or zigzag that edge, and it will stop the fray. So you don't have to experience what Fran and I did.
Well, that, and I would also encourage you not to wash, 10 yards at once, which is what I did. It's not a good idea.
No, it's not.
And, I just want to mention too, and the reason why this happens, I mean, we kind of all understand fabric. So there's a thread that runs this way that is perpendicular to the selvage. There's a thread that runs this way that is parallel to the selvage.
Right.
So it's this perpendicular thread that starts falling off. So that's the reason why we need to secure that if you're going to wash it. Now, I do not necessarily pre-wash my fabric. I'm going to tell you, I choose not to. But I also know that I am purchasing very high quality fabric, and I know that I'm always, always, always going to wash my quilts on cold and let them air dry.
Well, I have to admit that I've never washed fabric again.
We were scarred.
So I don't wash mine either. It is my preference not to, because after you wash your fabric,
Well, then you have to go and you have to repress it, and if you untangle it, if that's the case, repress it with your iron, and you need to use a sizing to put some of the body back in your fabric. So the more sizing that's in your fabric, of course, the more, shall I say, crispy it is, because then it's easier to sew. It's not going to give and drape in quite the same way. And by washing it, you wash all of that out, so you need to put it back in. So we've had a lot of questions and concerns about colors running and bleeding.
oh, that's true, but we have a secret ingredient. We have a link in the description below, and it is called synthropol. And synthropol is like a little magic ingredient that you put in your washer whenever you're washing your fabric or your quilts. It helps to eliminate the dye particles that haven't adhered good to the fabric.
Oh, so it gets rid of all of those.
Right.
So when you have a heavily dyed fabric like a black or a red,
Yes,
it'll wash all of those away so that they're not getting on your whites.
right. That is
Okay.
exactly right.
All
Now,
right.
I do recommend that if you don't pre-wash and you do want to avoid having any running on your quilt, don't use the synthropol, and then don't leave it lying wet in the washing machine, because that just encourages more bleeding.
yes.
And also test your reds and blacks.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, maybe
That's
just
a
put a
really
little
good
soapy
idea.
water and a little piece of that fabric, and then you take it out, and then you just press it between paper towels, and you can see if it's going to bleed.
That's a great tip. That is a really great tip. Now, also one of the things that I do, so I'm washing my quilts, I've used some synthropol, and then often, if it's the first washing, I will wash it a second time, and of course I always wash on cold in the
Yes.
gentle cycle. I'll put a capful of distilled vinegar in there, and the vinegar kind of helps set the color. So I learned this whenever I bought black towels one time, and they said, be sure to wash them with, vinegar the first time, and it'll set the color. So don't mix the synthropol and vinegar in the same wash, though, okay?
Yes. Okay. Step 1, synthropol, then wash again. Step 2,
Yeah.
vinegar. Okay.
Cold water, gentle cycle, and that should work really well. And set your timer so it's not sitting in the wash.
There's your points.
Perfect.
So, Fran, I understand that all of these little dots hold the secrets of the fabric.
It kind of does, and it's very cool, actually. So, the way I understand it is each one of these dots is a different dye color, and think of the fabric as being on this big roll, and it's going through this conveyor belt system. And each one of these dots is a different station that lays dye down. So for instance, the first station would have this color that's put down, and then it moves through, and then the second station would have the next color, and it goes through 18 different stations.
That is amazing that it takes so much.
Yes.
It's very labor intensive,
It
I would
kind of
think.
is. So now every fabric has a different number because there's different numbers of colors that are on the fabric. But you know, as a quilter, what's really cool is these can be an excellent tool for you whenever you're pulling your fabrics together. So one of the things I do is I use these to match fabric.
Well, you know, I've mentioned several times that even though I had made a quilt before, Fran actually far excelled. You know, she's living in her, you know, she was married and all of that, and I'm at my house making baby quilts when when she had Blake. But she came along and taught me so much more about quilting, and I remember I was having a hard time matching up fabric one time, and she said, well, use your dots. And I went, my dots? And that's whenever I first learned. So you taught me how to use those dots to match my fabric.
Yeah, and the reason why they help you match fabric is because sometimes when all of these colors are together, they change just a little bit, and it's really hard to see the true color. So the dots are separated out, so what you can do, and this is how I do it, is I'll take this selvage, if I'm not totally sure, I'll lay my fabric underneath it, and then I can see that this particular fabric kind of matches, say, color 15, so it works perfect.
Oh, that's cool.
But it's a little bit harder to see for sure.
Do this one.
Oh,
Let's do that one too.
I like doing this. So put this underneath so that you can kind of see where it falls. And in this case, I think it's 17 would be really close.
And did you know that this one has 3 dots on it, but it's all different shades?
Of
because
that
I
same,
peeked.
Oh, that's right. That's right. You could even compare your dots.
Right. They won't have the same number.
No,
But
no.
but you could compare them.
Yeah, so it's really a helpful tool. Now, something else to remember on your selvage is often it has the style numbers, the pattern designers, the company. So if you've got a little scrap of that fabric left over, save the selvage information and tie it around the bundle so that you can always have that if you need to find more. So we have a kit put together with this fabric.
We do. I have it right here.
Oh,
Let me show you how gorgeous this is. Now, you've been looking at this fabric, so you can see how pretty it is, but let's just look at an image. We'll go right straight to the good part. Oh. Now, this one, I love, love, love this little medallion. They almost look like umbrellas.
Oh, they do. They look like
Yeah.
the tops of parasols, which is really cool.
But it is so much fun with the flowers and all of that. And I love the contrast with that white and the darker that we picked out. It's perfect.
Looks gorgeous.
Absolutely. And this one is called Garden Twirl. It's 8023178. And you can use the stepping stones, perfect, from the book, Pretty Darn Quick. Now, let's talk about digitally printed fabric.
Oh.
You know, digital printing came on the scene just like Superman or something. And the really interesting thing is you won't see any dots here on the selvages. That's because it's not going to go through all those stages like you said.
Oh, it's all done at one time.
And there is really no limit to the number of colors that can be put in a digitally printed. And that's why some of the digitally printed fabrics, actually, they print scenes. It's almost like printing a picture, but you're doing it on fabric.
It's gorgeous, and the colors are so rich and deep with this. It's just beautiful.
So we have really been enjoying these colors, and I think that we should show them a beautiful kit with this fabric and show, you could pick out any of these colors, but let's show them what we picked out.
Okay, let's do that. Okay, so we have a kit here that has this really great color combination. I mean, there is every color under the sun in this, and it's just beautiful. And it's so fun and playful and festive. It's just neat. So
it feels unlimited.
It does. Yes. It really does. So this is our number 1. This is what we're using for our focus fabric. So our number 2, we chose to pull the yellows out because we feel like that they're that really rich, fun, light color that we can put in our number 2 spot. And of course the yellows match beautifully. And this has so many different shades of yellow in it, which works really well. And then for our number 3, which is our pop, We are using the red, same fabric as our number 2, but the depth there is there with the lights and the darks. And of course it picks up all the reds in our focus fabric, which is just so fun. And we have 2 images for you.
Oh, fun, double dip.
I love it. So our first one is our county fair pattern, and you can see how well it looks whenever all the colors come together and it's got so much movement. And what better pattern than county fair for such a festive, fun fabric? I think it's great. Then our second image that we have here is Pinwheel Plus One, and it's also fun. And I think Pinwheel Plus One also has all of that great movement in it, and it really works well.
It kind of just makes it look like the county fair with all the colors and
it really
lots of
does. Yeah, so both of them work really well, really super. So let's give the kit information for the kit here. It is called Groovin, which is great. I love that. The number is 8022575. It is the county fair pattern from the Easy Does It book. And as an alternate pattern, you can choose the Pinwheel Plus One. Now, these were a lot of the preferences that we have when working with fabrics, and a few things that we've learned as well along the way.
And let us know if you have some different types of fabric that you've used in quilting and some of the things that you've learned. And if you have any questions, be sure to leave them in the comments so that we can get back with you.
Absolutely. It's Fran Morgan
and Donna Robertson. Thanks so much for watching.